Okay, so if this is sounding weirdly timely or very specific, it's because this confession comes from my producer's family friends who happen to know that I have personally lived through something specifically similar to this.
Okay.
And that's why they called in today for this. I'm Lori March, project manager and problem solver, and this is True Home Confessions. Let's listen.
Hi, Lori. It's Bob and Jan's here too. We had a huge fire at the house yesterday. Oh my God. It could have been so much worse. Everyone's okay, including the cat. The fire captain was here and we've actually been red tagged. It is such a mess. We feel extremely lucky to have a place to stay with my sister, but I don't even know where to go from here. I called the insurance company to start a claim, and I'm borrowing a friend's truck and going to go back to the house to put up some plywood to try to keep the weather out of the areas that weren't damaged. Is there anything else I should do immediately? We're okay, exhausted, but okay. Reality is sinking in though, and I'm starting to feel overwhelmed.
Whew. Okay, in each episode, we hear a confession from you or somebody like you, calling in or emailing with a problem. And often when things go wrong, one of the first things we do is reach out to a friend, right? To see if our friends have any good advice for us. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. That's what True Home Confessions is all about. This episode's friend is Carl Foreman Jr., and we're here to talk about house fires.
That's heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say first, does the caller have any connections over at HGTV? I feel like this is a great time to bring in someone and be like, we really need a makeover. I think like there's just something going on with some of the walls and maybe the roof, like how much like can we get a true home renovation on the house?
Right.
Can we get something?
Do you think that's why they called me?
I mean, I can't rule it out.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna say that's not why they called you.
Right.
Maybe, you got to fire up that GoFundMe.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so smart.
Got to fire up that GoFundMe ASAP.
Yeah.
Get the photos, get the cat with the kid.
Yeah.
Get your blurb set up. Look, I hope they had the appropriate insurance. It's going to cover it all. Enough of it. This is America where like you're going to get screwed at some point in some way on something you need. Right, I'm sure it never covers all of it.
I mean, that's serious. When you have a fire, I feel like most of us, you get that insurance policy and you get all the rounds of numbers where it's like, you're so covered. If you stub your toe, it'll be coated in gold. And you look at the price for that and you're like, damn, that's expensive. And then somewhere in the middle, or the like, you pay us $100,000 and then we'll fix your house. So there's just a whole range of insurance coverage.
Yeah, first off, can we just say, like most insurance is a scam, right? Like, isn't most insurance a scam?
You start to wonder.
Don't
at some
aggregate
point.
me. Don't please don't put me on no list. All of my insurance providers are exempt from this theory.
Right.
But it's a scam. Yeah, man, it's weird because they'll be like, yeah, you're covered on everything except furniture and valuable things.
Right.
Or
you're so covered for absolutely everything except the one thing that happened to you.
Yeah, you meant a fire. Oh, yeah, we cover you if you're like, yo, that was fire. But
no.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. So it's tough. What does red tagged mean? Does that mean it's like the house is done, no matter like there's no coming back?
So this one actually can speak to because my husband and my brother-in-law and I own a property in Malibu together near the beach.
Flex. Okay.
Family. We love investing together. And our place burned down in the Woolsey fire.
Oof.
I mean, it's a part of Malibu that had never burned before, and we're a part of like a bigger complex. And
so you're pioneers in a sense.
Oh my gosh.
In the worst way.
In the very worst way. And, when we finally were able to get to the house, right on the front door is this big red tag. And it basically is the fire captain or the fire folk have come, and they have said, you can't live here anymore. It's uninhabitable. And I could be
You're
wrong.
a trailblazer. Doo-dum-tsh.
My goodness. It really
Or
felt like
homeblazer.
it was not cool.
Yeah, that sucks. Could you just tear the whole thing down and rebuild?
That's what we had to do.
Okay.
We're still finishing that right now.
Okay.
Yeah. But they sort of determine how far your house has to be torn down. Is it, like we had to redo our whole foundation.
Wow, okay.
And these are things, that you immediately scurry back to your insurance policy and you're like, let's look. What does it say,
Yeah.
And you learn a lot. Yeah. But also, for me, our place, when it burned, we were still able to walk in it. The parts of it that burned, the floor was still there. So I kind of learned some good stuff about when you are re-entering a house after a fire. Like, you can't wear tennis shoes in case it's still hot.
Oh.
What if you melt your shoes while you're wandering around?
I would be so, especially if I had these on too, I'd be
I'd
be so tight. But
sad.
then again, I wouldn't wear them back into the house.
No.
I'd wear something that would be
You'd be wearing whatever you were wearing because your house burned down.
true, right? Because you don't have.
All your other shoes would be gone, friend.
Dang, that's right. Oh, well, go get you some boots, I
Yeah,
suppose.
Totally.
Okay, because I never considered what if the was the floor still hot?
It wasn't, because we had to wait for a couple days to get back in.
Mm-hmm.
But, like our caller was talking about how he's going back to board it up.
Yeah.
Because, frankly, I think sometimes people see a house that burned down and they think, this is a good time to go look for somebody's stuff to steal.
Yes. But he was also talking about protecting it from the weather.
Yeah.
About just not getting, I guess, I assume there may be things that could be recovered.
Yeah.
I would hope there'd be things that could recover that you don't want to get rained on.
Yep.
And
Yeah, a lot of fires happen in the kitchen, obviously.
Yeah.
Or I know the dryer is another place that catches on fire
dryer.
regularly. Yeah, all that lint in the dryer. If you
Clean
don't
out
clean that out, and then the whole venting and everything.
I'm a big proponent of cleaning out that lint trap.
Do you maintain your appliances?
I mean, the clothes won't get dry if the lint is all in there. That's part of if you listen, if you're spending too much time, if you're having to dry your clothes a bunch of times, that's probably because the lint trap is full. I don't know the science, but the clothes don't get dry as well.
Yeah.
And then in addition, your house could burn down, apparently.
Yes.
I'm kind of serious about the GoFundMe. I feel like that's actually
Yeah.
probably prudent. Because I don't know what the insurance policy is. I don't know what thankfully can stay at the sister's place.
And the cat got out.
The cat got out.
That made me feel better. I
Yeah.
kind of laughed a little when I heard it, but then I was like, no, I'm really glad the cat got
Well,
out.
of course, the firemen, they got to save the cat. It's
Yeah.
part of the job. It's on the brochure.
Hold
Those
them for-
cats, I feel like animals are good at knowing when danger is happening better than humans, right?
Yeah. Certainly cats, because they would leave you, just not care at all if you got out. The cat saved itself.
Absolutely. I mean, what's the cat gonna do? Drag you?
No, but the dog would probably stick around. Dogs are loyal. Cats,
Yeah.
no.
Hey, man. The thing that I always when people talk about fires is all the stuff all the memorabilia. I
Yep.
guess the easiest term for that is certain framed photos.
Yep.
Or
Yep.
if you have physical albums, family albums, records, I don't know, whatever stuff that you want to keep. And then people who go through that, they tend to give it's just stuff. They get real zen about it,
I feel like they get there later. I think
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
moment,
oh.
they're not feeling that at
No,
all.
I think that's the end of a very painful journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I mean, our place was not our primary home, and so we are so much luckier that way that I didn't lose family memories.
A lot of stock photos got burnt out.
I had just sadly I had just done a bunch of new art for the place and a beautiful quilt and a bunch of vintage glassware stuff for the place. So there's things every now and then I'm like, oh, that shirt, where is that? Oh shit, it's gone. So there is a little.
It's in the atmosphere.
Yeah. I breathed it in when we were wandering the house. But I feel like for people who are losing their everything, that's all so much more emotional.
Yeah.
And maybe like not getting taken advantage of, because I do think there's a lot of scams around fire. Like people come to your house and they're like, I'll remodel it for you. Like, let me do your insurance claim.
Is that what you found, that people were like,
we didn't
like
find
descended
that.
like vultures?
I think they do it for single family homes. I think when
Okay.
people have one house that burned down, and I think that's really a problem for people, is getting taken advantage of by someone who claims to be an adjuster, or just some, I think there's a lot of room there to get in trouble. So just trying to put your like careful hat on,
Yeah.
Well, Carl Foreman Jr., we have, I don't know if we solved any problems, but I feel like
that's, yeah. I know I didn't. You had some great info.
this one we're really going to need an expert for.
Hey, yeah. I don't know if we called the right place, my guy, but heart goes out.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
This episode is brought to you by Renewal by Andersen. As a brand ambassador, I gotta tell you, I love this company. The people who work here are genuinely wonderful. I get it. Buying windows and doors is not the most exciting home improvement project. But when you go with a high quality brand, you get expert level peace of mind. If you need an upgrade, here's an offer. Buy one window or door, get one 40% off. Plus an additional $200 off if you buy 4 or more. Special financing is available. Are you in? Give Renewal by Andersen a call at 844-290-2458. Tell them I sent you. All right, next up, we're going to talk about that confession and explore the friendly advice that we got from Carl Foreman Jr. with our expert. While I've got him, I've got a few other questions too. Today, we're talking with the owner of Shine Insurance, Jeremy Goodrich. Jeremy, you have an entire YouTube channel explaining insurance in actual simple words, and I love it.
Well, thanks, Lori. It's great to be on your show. I hope I can provide some insight to your listeners and tell you a little bit about whether Carl is right, wrong, or indifferent in this process.
We're counting on you. Our confessor called in to share that he had had a major house fire the day before. It sounded like everybody was okay, but this was clearly a big deal. Okay, so Jeremy, our friend of the show, Carl Foreman Jr. says, I hope that they had some good insurance. This is America. You're going to get screwed in some way. Insurance never covers it all. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's definitely how we see insurance. And sometimes it's true and sometimes it's not. I think it depends on the quality of the insurance company, on the claim adjuster that walks you through the process, and on the decisions that you made as far as what coverage you wanted when you purchased the policy. I'll go through all those details, but I think that a lot more people think insurance is a scam than the reality. I think insurance companies, at least the good ones, really are trying to pay out in claims scenarios in whatever makes sense and is fair. The way we get confused is because we think everything should be covered. And the reality is there's a balance between things that are covered and things that aren't. And the confusion in that space is where we start to really feel like insurance is a scam.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I feel like you really nailed it there, that we think everything should be covered, but maybe that's not what we paid for up front, or in the process of trying to sort of value engineer and get something that we can afford, we've maybe kind of cut off our own, nose to spite our face. And then in an emergency, we maybe don't have what we thought we had.
Absolutely. You go out to the beach and you buy some sunscreen on your way out, and you have an option that's $1 for a gallon, or an option that's $5 for a little tiny bottle. Which one is probably going to protect you better if from getting a sunburn, right? The same thing goes for so many other things. Insurance is no different. It's just really hard to see because it's a bunch of legalese, jargony junk, and it's hard to know what the details are. So when you have that fire, you're really finding out whether the sunscreen worked or not.
Oof, I love it. Okay, other than his own insurance, Carl said that insurance is a scam. And he says you're always covered for something except the furniture and the valuable things, which I kind of laughed when he said that. But frankly, that's actually different types of coverage there, right? Your belongings. And, if you have a high expense thing like a wedding ring or something like that, or if maybe you collect nice watches. Once I started to think about it, I realized these are actually separate things in your insurance. So, he's kind of not wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the coverages you have on your policy is for personal property. This is the stuff inside your house. If you imagine taking your house, picking it up, turning it upside down and shaking it, all the stuff that falls out, and I guess if you had a fire and there's no roof, it would really all fall out. But it's imaginary here, right? We're just pretending. So
Sure.
all the stuff that falls out is your personal property. Most policies have a lot of coverage for that, right? They've got a
Yep.
number in that policy. If you look at your policy, you'll see it, how much is available. Maybe it's $100,000, maybe it's $150,000. But that coverage tends to be limited for specialized collectible things. So if you've got a Rolex worth $25,000, it's very likely that that is not properly covered by just the normal personal property coverage on your policy. If you got a hula hoop, that probably is covered really well on your policy just under personal property. So those valuable collectibles don't have as much coverage. Usually the policy limits the amount to like $1,000 or something like that. So if you're thinking to yourself, hey, is my wedding ring well covered? Well, if you bought it when you eloped to Hawaii and it's a $200 wedding ring, then it probably is covered just fine. You don't have to worry too much about it. But if it's nicer, you definitely want to add it to your policy specifically. Scheduling on a personal articles floater is like the nerdy language for it. But yeah, just call your insurance agent and say, hey, look, I've got these 5 or 6 items that are worth more. We're going to add some coverage on there, and it's going to cover it much better than if you don't have it on there listed properly. So Carl's kind of right in that if you haven't put it on there properly, it could feel like you didn't get what you needed out of it. But there is tons of personal property coverage on most insurance policies.
The last thing that Carl mentioned that we both kind of laughed at was he said, get some pictures and fire up that GoFundMe. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, HGTV coming in and fixing your house and having a GoFundMe connected, I don't think that's probably good advice from Carl, but it's not terrible advice either. What we're trying to do, though, is avoid that with your insurance policy, right? If you have a decent insurance policy, you shouldn't have to do either of those things. Call Lori and try and get an HGTV connection or have a GoFundMe account. So I think it really has to do with how good your policy is. If you got that dollar bottle of sunscreen and you're going to get burned, then you're going to have to come up with a GoFundMe solution. If you got a decent policy that is going to take care of you, it shouldn't be something you have to navigate.
That is such a fun analogy, by the way, the sunscreen. I love it. Okay, so you're on the show. True Home Confessions asks, are we taking this friendly advice from Carl? Is it advice worth following? Did Carl get it right?
Well, I think Carl got some things wrong. I mean, one is if we believe in our insurance policy that it's actually going to take care of it, that it's put together well, and our agent and company has our best interests in mind, then most of Carl's advice is not necessary. It's not really a scam. You don't need a GoFundMe, those kinds of things. I think in general, though, Carl was at least thinking in the right way. He was kind of like trying to think, all right, how can we solve this situation? How can we address things with the building? How can we protect stuff? How can we avoid from having things stolen from our house if a fire made it so people can get in? So I'm giving Carl like a C+, B-, I think is probably the right answer.
Okay. I love it. I can't wait to tell him. Okay, so what is the very first thing we should do? Our caller says the house just burned down. Where do you begin, Jeremy?
So I think we break this into 3 sections. One is what to do at that particular moment, which is the question you're asking. The second is, will insurance cover you, which Carl asked a lot about, and I think we can dig into. And then what is actually covered. So what to do at that key moment. Look, you've had a fire and you're trying to navigate things. Safety first is always the first step. So getting out of there, getting safe, making sure your family, your cat, everyone is safe is really step 1. Everything else can be figured out later. If it is safe, stopping the damage is a key next step. If you have a water pipe that burst in your basement and water is flowing and building in there, if you know where the main water shutoff valve is, which hopefully everyone listening does, you can go shut that off, right? It's safe. You're not going to get injured by going and shutting that off, and it's going to stop more damage. So if you have the ability to stop damage, you can do that, right? The next thing Carl brought up, and I absolutely agree with him, document. So documenting the process is incredibly key. Documenting what happened before you start throwing things away. All that kind of stuff is really important. And then the last thing I would say is it's time to contact the people who are professionals who are really going to help you with this. So remediation companies are the ones who professionally come in and deal with fire and water damage. These people know exactly what they're doing. They work with insurance companies all the time, so they know how to document things well. And if you call them in, that's a really good first step to start to deal with the situation. If it's a small thing and you want to turn on a bunch of fans and try and fix things, whatever. But if you've had a big fire, if you have smoke damage, if you have major damage to your house, it's just unlikely that you need to be the one to resolve that. And I think getting a remediation company in there as soon as possible, those are the steps that you need to take immediately.
Yeah, that's so smart. I like the stopping the damage. And perhaps for a fire, that's not realistic, right? I think most of us are not super aware of how to be really safe around a fire. I mean, if it's in your kitchen, I think it's very important for everybody to understand different types of fire. Is it a grease fire? You know, what has
Yeah.
caught on fire? And are you capable of putting it out? Sometimes it's as simple as putting a lid on the pot or the pan. If you've got if you can safely slap your hand in there and put a lid on something, sometimes that's a huge step in stopping a fire. Or a fire blanket. You know, I have a fire blanket in my kitchen. I think it's a fascinating, just such an interesting, just cheap little
So
thing that
great.
you can have. It's so powerful. So, you know, stopping the damage and potentially for fire, once it gets past a certain point, you just have to get your buns out of there and be safe.
Yeah, it's like so many things in life. If you prepare ahead of time, if different people are different things. Most of my life I've been a safety third kind of person, right? I just like, safety, wasn't on the top of my mind. As I've gotten into this world, I've really made safety more of a top priority. And so, I have things in my kitchen. I know where they are. A fire extinguisher or a fire blanket is a really good example. If you have that and you know how to use it, great. You can solve a lot. You can limit the damage a ton. If you don't, though, you've got to make that decision at that point. And again, I think safety first is the best rule to live by. If it's not safe, then just get out of there and find a safe place and let other people navigate it.
I'm really surprised to hear you say that safety third used to be your way. Can you tell me, how do you end up being, you're an insurance guy, like this is your
Yeah.
jam. How do you feel like you're more risk averse, or like, I need some backstory on this, Jeremy?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always been somewhat risk averse. I mean, I was an athlete. I was an elementary school teacher. I think as a teacher, if I really analyze it, I wasn't safety third when I had 30 other people's kids running around. Certainly I was making sure that I was taking care of those kids and everything was good. So I think it's more of a mentality thing where, I grew up in San Diego. I was, surfing and things like that. There's an element where you have to put the risk aside so you can do the thing that you love to do. And maybe that's what I'm getting at. I think ultimately I got into insurance because I married my wife and business partner, who's a third generation insurance agent. And as I traveled into this space, it was like, okay, I see all these risks and I understand it a little bit more. And so safety became more and more of a priority. But really, I think you can't be an elementary school teacher and not be thinking safety a whole lot, right?
Right, for sure. I love that you married into safety. That's so fun.
I did.
We started with what to do immediately. One of the other things is obviously figuring out where you're going to be. You know, if your house burned down, where are you
Yeah.
staying that night? I'm thinking sort of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We need shelter. Like we need to, find a
Yeah.
place. What else should we be considering for those first, 48 hours?
So I think that that's a really good point. The next thing after you've done all the things I described before is how am I going to solve my living situation and my shelter? So I think Bob said he had a friend or a sister or something like that. He went to their house, right? But eventually, staying at a friend's house isn't going to solve the problem for you. Your insurance policy should have an answer to that question. It's called additional living expenses coverage, and it actually addresses the cost of living somewhere else for the period of time your home is uninhabitable, and even the extra costs of having to eat out more often than you would have if you had a kitchen available to you. And so, going to, whether that's a hotel at first or a long-term hotel or a rental house to live in for a year, if you just know it's going to take a whole year to rebuild. So solving that living situation is something that definitely has to happen. Obviously the first day, at least a short-term temporary solution. But
Right.
in the first couple of weeks, getting to another solution. And some people don't know that coverage is on their policy. And if you have a good insurance company, some of them will help you pay those costs right from the start, rather than you having to pay them and then get paid back by the insurance company. So this is where it's really important to have a good, open line of communication with your company insurance adjuster. This is the person at the insurance company who makes all of the decisions through the claim process, including cutting checks, which obviously is the most important decision that they make
Yeah.
through the process. And so
So
having that conversation.
your adjuster is not your agent. So if you've gone through the process of getting an insurance, policy, the person that you got your policy with, and
Right.
your adjuster is not that person.
That's correct. So you have an agent who's really kind of on the sales side of insurance world, right? Their job is to get policies in place, to make changes, to do all those kinds of things. But when a claim happens, it's a specific person inside of the company, and their only job is to navigate claims. These are great people to have as friends at parties, by the way, because they have tons of stories, just like the story we're telling here. They can tell you all sorts of crazy stories about wild things that have happened to people. But the claim adjuster ultimately, is not going to be your primary point of contact that you had before. With a
Got it.
lot of places, you can use your agent, though, as a conduit if you need that help. You can go to your agent and say, hey, my adjuster's a real jerk and isn't doing anything to help me. Can you help me with that? Some agents can help, some agents can't help, but you can try and leverage that relationship if it's there.
Interesting. So if you end up feeling like you are paired with someone who's not listening, or feels like you're some sort of a mismatch, is that something inside your insurance that you can ask for a different adjuster?
So there's a couple of solutions you can take here. One would be to say, hey, I'm not sure this is working out. Is there a different adjuster? The downside of that is if they say no, now now your adjuster is even more mad at you because you tried to find someone
Yeah.
else.
Woof.
So, you got to walk that lightly. You can also ask your agent to help, like I said before. And then I guess the third thing is if you really feel like either the adjuster isn't doing well, I would add, you can go to there's always a supervisor. So you can always go to a
Okay.
supervisor and try and bring that person in. The last step would be something like a public adjuster, which you and Carl kind of talked about when you were talking about the fire you were experiencing, whereas people who come in and say, hey, I'm a professional at helping you navigate the insurance company, and I will take care of all of the drama. The insurance company is trying to screw you over. It's a scam. I'm going to come in and I'm going to help you solve the problem. Just like personal injury attorneys, there are good public adjusters out there and there are bad public adjusters out there. Personal injury attorneys and public adjusters have very similar jobs. Their job is to get as much money out of insurance companies as they possibly can. There's one big reason for that. They get a large portion of the payout when it happens. And so if you bring in a public adjuster, you have to know that the second you sign on the dotted line with that person, you've just handed over 30% of the claim to that person. You've also given them that you've made them the middle person. So you can't talk to the company anymore. And when money does get paid out, it gets paid out to the public adjuster. And then the public adjuster pays you. And so you've put someone in the middle, and it just can turn out to be really bad and nasty. But again, sometimes if you're just having someone who's listening right now may be so frustrated with the insurance company that it's time to try and find someone to help them. And in that scenario, it could be a valuable thing to do.
Our fire, we were a part of a larger complex, and I think it was just a massive claim because it was a bunch of condos that burned, and we did end up having a public adjuster because it was just such a large claim that it was
Yeah.
just unhandleable, for normal human beings in an HOA. And I think we went through a bunch of them, frankly,
Yeah.
before we really landed on something that worked. But Yeah, it's so interesting. I think most people don't realize that you're handing over a part of your recovery to that person. And 30%
Yeah.
is wild to me because, you're really thinking about like if you need to rebuild your house, there's a cost to that. And then what happens if you've hired an adjuster and you need to rebuild, but 30% of that money goes away to that person? Has anyone ever not had what they needed to rebuild because they hired an adjuster?
Absolutely, all the time. But people have also not had what they needed to rebuild because the insurance company wouldn't give it to them, or they haven't had enough to rebuild because they didn't set up their policy properly. So there's a
Sure.
variety of reasons why you could end up in that situation. But you hit exactly on the point, right? Like when you bring someone in, to me, it's always just important to make decisions with eyes wide open. And if
Yep.
you're I would always try and navigate the insurance company on your own first, especially in small single family home claim. It doesn't feel small to the person who just lost their entire house, right? But if you're navigating it, try and navigate it with the company. And if the company if it starts to go south, then you can make those conversations. But why hand over money to a middle person if it's going to go fine? Wait until
Yeah.
there's a problem there. So
Yeah.
those are the kinds of decisions you got to make.
So I want to rewind a little bit and ask you, when someone is thinking about insurance, can you tell me, like, just briefly, the types of clauses? So we've got like, what was the one that you just mentioned earlier where we were talking about how long we're allowed
Additional
to
living
be?
expenses, like the extra
Yeah.
expenses. Yeah. Yep.
Yep. Okay. So additional living expenses. How do people end up underinsured?
So it's a good question. I mean, I think when we go out and buy an insurance policy, too often we're thinking about only one thing. And you know what that is, Lori? It's how cheap we can get our insurance policy, right? And
Sure.
so when you go out and get that, especially now that you can go get a homeowner's insurance policy online, no one is helping you. No one is providing, ideas for what you really need. No one is there saying, hey, I know it's a little more expensive, but here's this valuable additional living expenses coverage. It's only going to cost you $20 a year, but it could give you thousands of dollars because, for having to live somewhere else, things like that. So we go online, we buy the cheapest policy, and we don't realize that it has super high deductibles. We don't realize in California that it excludes wildfire or it excludes earthquake. These are big exclusions in California's that's on a lot of policies, right? We don't realize that the building coverage, the coverage that's there to rebuild your house, is half of what it would actually cost to rebuild your house. So I think that that's the big problem, and that's where that insurance is a scam starts to come in, right? Because you went online, you just said, I don't know, whatever, what's the cheapest option? Okay, here it is. Insurance is expensive anyway, so I'm just going to take the cheapest insurance policy, and you buy that, and then something bad happens and suddenly wildfire is excluded and you don't have any coverage or something like that. So I think on that front end, it's, you know, I'm an independent insurance advisor. My job is to, offer people policies that actually will cover them in a situation. I think that's valuable. Obviously, I think that's valuable. It's what I do. But I think you just have to get a little educated on the front end, like listening to our conversation right now, and you can
Yep.
make sure that you have a better experience on the back end.
Yeah. Jeremy, you and I, Bob and Jan, and our friend who's listening to this in their ears, I would like to pretend that we could go back in a time machine for a minute before this fire happened. And we've talked about having good coverage and understanding your coverage. For me, one of the things I discovered was having a really accurate home inventory was really powerful, because I, called and when I mentioned that I had a home inventory, they just wrote me a check for the full amount of our belongings coverage,
Yep.
because to them it meant that I had, photos and videos, and I just had a record of everything, and they were able to immediately see that, we were going to need to max out this coverage, and they just sent it to me. So
Yeah.
is there anything else like a home inventory that we can do to be more prepared?
I think most people listen to the idea of a home inventory and they're like, oh, I can't even imagine. Like, I just have so much stuff, right? And so, yeah, you can absolutely do a home inventory. That's really going to help, like you said, Lori. I think if you want to take one step down from that, get out your phone right now and just walk around your house, open a couple drawers or whatever, record a video. that is your entire house and the best you can, 20 minutes of just walking around your house. That's not an inventory. It certainly isn't going to help as much as what you had, but it's going to give you the ability to look back and say, here are all the things. You're right. It's best if if the insurance company says, look, here's how much coverage you had. Here's $150,000. Do with it what you will. And then you can just move forward from there. And how an insurance company navigates that does really depend on what they think the situation is. Adjusters are trained to pay you what you actually lost. So if they think that's significantly less than the coverage you have, they're going to ask you for all the evidence you have. And that video is going to become really valuable. You pause that video and you're like, okay, I had that couch, I had that bookshelf, I had that TV, I had, you're able to list items out. Adjusters know that you don't know everything you had. And a good insurance company shouldn't say, well, we're not going to pay you for anything that you can't prove you had. They should say, here's a reasonable number for the amount of loss you experienced, and there will be a balance made there. But there's zero doubt that the more evidence you have, and this is true across all insurance claims, the more evidence you have, the better position you are to get the best amount of money from the insurance company to replace what you lost.
Yeah, I think in my early career, I used to do home inventory for my clients. And one of the things that I think people forget to take pictures of is your house, the structure. Do you have expensive tile? Do you have a nice countertop? What are your surfaces? Those things are super important to also have a record of, so that when they say, well, that looks like $1 tile, you can have a photo and well, no, I'm sorry, that's actually marble. This costs a lot more than $1. And so those conversations get a lot more powerful when you have the photo evidence.
Yeah. A good claim adjuster wants to pay you what you deserve. Insurance is all about making you whole, getting you back to where you were before the bad thing happened, right? We're not going to build a 4-story mansion for someone who had a 1-story bungalow. That doesn't make sense, and no one would expect that. But we do want to see our insurance companies replace the 1-story bungalow with a 1-story bungalow, replace that marble countertop with a marble countertop. And I think that's what you're getting at. And that's what insurance companies should be doing. And the more you have as far as evidence, the better.
I love it. And so if I'm making a hot little list of things that people should consider, if they want to not be in the position that Bob and Jan are in, we talked about an inventory. We talked about good coverage. We quickly talked about a fire blanket, a fire extinguisher. One other thing that comes to my mind is having an escape route for your family. Like, Bob said the cat got out, but if you have kids and dogs and cats, like really thinking through, if you woke up in the middle of the night and your house was on fire, what's your plan?
I think that's exactly right. I mean, nobody wants to think about bad things that happen to them, which is another reason why we don't like insurance, because it's asking you to contemplate bad things that happen, right? But if we think about those bad things that could happen before, and we do this constantly when we're driving, when we're taking our kids to school, we're constantly thinking about bad things that happen, subconsciously. So to bring that to a conscious level and just say, look, let's figure out how we would get out. If we have upstairs bedrooms, should we have some way to have a ladder down out the window? Or things of that nature. In our family, we have a Sunday night meeting at 8 p.m. every week, and we talk about whatever things the kids want to talk about, whatever things we want to talk about. And I think that's a great place to bring up, hey, do we know what to do in a fire? Do we know what to do if this happens or that happens? And then we can move on to the next topic. We don't have to dwell on the bad things that could happen, but we want to be prepared for them no matter what they are.
Yeah, I love that. Yep, things you can do in advance. I know myself, all of my insurance premiums went up this year. Everything, everywhere went up. Can you tell me a little bit about that and what's going on and what you're seeing in that front?
Absolutely. So claims have skyrocketed in 2021 across the nation. Insurance claims paid out about $6 billion. In 2022, it paid out $26 billion. And in 2023, it paid out about $36 billion. So from 2021 to 2023, we had a 6x increase in claims. Insurance companies are closing down. Some are closing down their home and auto insurance, moving out of states. Certainly California, Texas, Florida, Louisiana, all those states have seen insurance companies totally move out of the state. So we're seeing insurance companies make all these different decisions. Well, it's a simple supply and demand economic situation when that happens. Insurance premiums are going to go up. They're going up extremely in coastal states or states that have high risk of catastrophic losses. They're even going up I'm in Bloomington, Indiana, right in the middle of the Midwest, where there's tornadoes and hail and stuff like that. We're seeing our premiums go up a ton as well. And so part of that reason is catastrophic losses. There are clearly more catastrophic losses than there have been in the past. That is, a lot. People may have different opinions about why that's happening, but it is absolutely happening. And that is a truth. We're seeing that liability claims. So when someone falls down and says, oh, you hurt, I hurt myself on your stairs, or I slipped on ice, and I'm going to, sue you for $300 million, or, that's an extreme example, obviously, but
Right.
those are increasing, and we're seeing more losses there. We're seeing the cost of materials and the cost of labor significantly increase to replace that house. So, when Bob and Jan have go back to replace that house that they had burned down, or I know it didn't totally burn down, but it's going to cost a lot more money to do that. Mix that with inflation. And the last thing I would say is, just like banks, insurance companies take the money that they have while they have it and invest it in stocks, bonds, real estate, all that kind of stuff. Particularly in 2022, that was a really bad market, right? So not only were they losing money in claims, but they were losing money in investments. Now, we don't have to shed a tear for insurance company executives. They're still doing fine, but that's just the
I wasn't
reality of the
gonna.
situation. Right. Yeah, they're still doing fine.
Nope.
But that is the reality of the situation. Now, 2023 investments looked better. We'll see what 2024 looks like. So those are all the factors in a nutshell into why we're seeing insurance premiums go up. It's not baloney. This really is insurance companies having to decide, okay, we're losing a lot of money. What are we going to do about that?
All right. We're going to wind down here a little bit. Is an uninsurable house uninhabitable?
No. I mean, it might be impossible to get a loan on it. I mean, so in Florida, this is going on a lot. Insurance is going up by so much that people are choosing not to have insurance at all, or not to have wind, hail, or named storm insurance, which covers you for hurricanes. And so their biggest problem is simply that their lenders won't continue to let them, have a mortgage if they don't find an insurance solution. So in an uninsurable house, if it's uninsurable because it's broken down, or it's had a fire and it hasn't been fixed, or something like that, I guess you could say that would be uninhabitable. But if it's uninsurable simply because it's on the coast of California and you can't get, earthquake coverage or wildfire coverage or whatever, then no, I wouldn't say that's uninhabitable. It's just probably going to be very hard to get a loan on.
Got it. That makes sense. Bob sounded exhausted and overwhelmed. A house fire obviously means your life is pretty far from normal. But on a deeper level, I think he wants to know what he can do right now to have the best possible outcomes going forward.
I think that's the best question of the whole conversation, right? It's like, what can you do to make this process as smooth and clear as possible? And I think it's just to understand what you're doing moving forward. So having a checklist of all the things that you're going to go through in the process, understanding that the insurance company has only one role, and that is the money, and that your contractors are the ones who are actually going to do the work, right? Your remediation contractor at first, who's going to fix the damage, and then your general contractors who are going to come in and add plumbing and framing and drywall and roofing or whatever they need to do. Making sure that you're clear with those people up front as to exactly what you need from them, and they are clear with you. And I think the most important thing is timelines. If your contractors and your insurance claims adjuster are providing you timelines, you need to document those timelines. And then when that timeline comes up, you need to ask them where they're at on it. I can guarantee you one thing: at least one timeline will be broken in the process, probably more than one. It's contracting, right? It's things
Yep.
change. But if you're on top of the process, you're getting clear information from everyone involved. And then when you hit those waypoints, you're saying, hey, you said you were going to have this done at this point. Is it done or not? Why isn't it done? How does that change the timeline? Right? That some of that stuff is annoying, but it's what's really going to give you the peace of mind through the process that you know what's going on. If it's a year that Bob and Jane are going to have to live somewhere else, then go live somewhere else, right? Once you've settled into that other place, it's not such a big deal. The anxieties come from not knowing, from not having clear insights and information, from not having clear deadlines. And if those deadlines get missed, not having clear ideas about why they did and how that changes things. So to me, the easiest way for them to make the next steps of the process, as you experienced, I'm sure, as you all rebuilt your house, is just to know what the process is and what to expect and how to navigate that.
I love it. Carl says insurance is a scam. Kick off a GoFundMe. Jeremy says check your policy, get good coverage up front, and get organized on the back end. And I would say hang in there, Bob and Jan. Get organized. May your road to rebuilding be shorter than mine. We're at 5 years now, and I'm extremely hopeful that we will get our keys very soon.
Wow.
But if you're out there listening, one of the most powerful tools in my arsenal was definitely that home inventory. Get that fire blanket, check your insurance policy, pay attention to details here, and may you never need to use any of it. I want to thank you all for listening, for all the ways you can find Carl Foreman Jr. and Jeremy Goodrich, and more information on everything we talked about. Hit the notes. If you don't mind, would you please share this with a friend or two? Normally I would just say share it with one person, but what if that first friend was busy? Thanks for spending time with us. Hit subscribe, and let's do it again.